everybody. I am Anna Brown, and this is my fabulous husband, Cody Brown. We're going to be talking a little bit tonight about mass media and how that impacts the Christian family. Before we get started, I have a couple questions for you guys. So raise your hand if you are on Facebook. So if you have a Facebook account, okay. Have any of you ever tweeted? Okay, so there's no tweeters in here. That's okay. What about watched a YouTube video? Watched a video, several of you, yes. How about has anybody watched TV? Everybody hopefully raise their hands there. What about, do you watch TV once a day at least? I definitely have to raise my hand on that one. So yeah, I'd say media is so ingrained in our culture today. So it's very important that as we look at the types of media we are engaging in, that we keep an eye for God within that and how to keep that kind of Christian focus when we're looking at different types of media and consuming it. Because for some of us more than others, we're going to be consuming a lot of media. And a lot of times it's not things that we choose to consume, but it doesn't matter where you are. Even in Walmart now, they've got TVs on the end caps that are giving you commercials while you're shopping. So it doesn't matter where you are, if you have a TV, if you don't, you're going to be exposed to it. So we're hopefully tonight going to give you some tips and ways that you can look critically at media to ensure that you are using it in a way that is benefiting you and not kind of a detriment to kind of your values and your structure as a family. So first we're going to start with a little bit about Cody and myself and introduce ourselves. And Cody will start first.
So by profession, I'm a freelancer in TV and film production. So I do, these days it's primarily animation and director photography work for a various array of different things, a lot of which is local corporate video these days and among others. So I began my career at Country Music Television, working for the online division there, producing content for the web. Since we moved to Ohio, I've worked on television shows such as 19 Kids and Counting on TLC, The Judge, which is aired on Oprah Winfrey Network, and faith-based films like The Grace Card. And here's Anna.
Mine is a little less impressive. I currently work at Standard Register as a corporate trainer, so I work in our learning department, helping to deliver training to the folks in our organization and also measuring the effectiveness of that training. So, next slide, please. So we went to Western Kentucky University, which is where we met, and the rest is basically history. We were married 2 years ago, and we have a little one coming in July, so we're kind of excited about that. Just to answer the question for those of you guys out there thinking if I potatoes and donuts or... So our agenda tonight. So what we're going to cover three main things. The role of mass media in our lives and kind of how we interact with that on a daily basis. The second thing is the rise of media in our world. So a little bit of history on how we got to where we are today. It's so prevalent in our culture today, but how did it get that way? And then the third thing is how to look critically at media today as a Christian. And again, to keep that focus and perspective. And keep in mind, as we go through things today, you may have heard some of these points, you may have thought of some of these things yourselves, but as adults in particular, it's all about focus. And even though you've heard something, it doesn't mean that we're focused on it. So the goal of tonight is to hear these messages and to really kind of take into perspective and refocus ourselves. So when we do approach the media, we're looking at it again in focus of how would God and the church really want me to be consuming media, because again, regardless, we're all consumers of it, even if we want to or not. So hopefully that'll bring some perspective for you guys tonight.
So to lay a base, we want to step back and look at where we came from to get to this point in our evolution of media. So in terms of audio and music and radio broadcasts, at one point families would sit around, dial into a radio station and listen to a nightly program. Today we all have personal music players of our own. and at one point the hottest thing on the block was a black and white TV. Nowadays, things come at you with 3D TV right in your home. You used to have to call and speak to an operator to connect you to your friends and loved ones to talk on the phone. And then Zach Morris brought us the brick 80s phone, brought us into the cellular world. And now everybody has, for the most part, or the vast majority have smartphones. And for those of you that don't know, I mean, connects you to any sort of media outlet that imaginable, almost to a fault. So this brings us to different elements and some statistics for you. For those of you who don't know, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, YouTube is an online outlet for for videos of a variety of contents. Over 800 million unique users visit YouTube each month. Over 4 billion hours of video are watched each month. 72 hours of video are uploaded every minute. We're putting it out there faster than we can watch it. 70% of YouTube traffic comes from outside of the US. I think this is important, especially as with Missa as we start to put out our own content to try to reach others throughout the world and the nation with our message. I think that's an astounding statistic that 70% of those who might view our material are not even domestic. Facebook, social networking site for those of you who don't know, where you can just air all of your dirty laundry. Monthly active users now total nearly 850 million. More than 1 million websites have integrated with Facebook in different ways. 250 million photos are uploaded to Facebook every day. 23% of Facebook's users check their account 5 or more times daily. And I think this is a statistic that really speaks to how involved we are on a day-to-day with media. Twitter, for those of you unfamiliar, this is basically a digital bullhorn where you can walk around and spout every thought that comes to mind. A lot of what is on Twitter are news of various types, just people's updates on what they're doing from day-to-day, links. There are 175 million tweets sent from Twitter every day in 2012. The average Twitter user has tweeted 307 times. Since the dawn of Twitter, there's been a total of 163 billion tweets. So, let me get caught up here. The next two slides look at the average person and how much time they spend monthly using different types of media. With regard to television, 144 hours, equating to 6 full days of television, is consumed by the average American per month. And so, if there are 720 hours in a month, the average person spends 205 of them involved in using some type of media. That's 25% of our lives are involved in engagement in media of some fashion. This is a breakdown, obviously, of how much of that 23%, or where it's distributed among various types of media. By definition, media is a medium of cultivation, conveyance, or expression. A medium meaning a means of affecting or conveying something, as a channel of communication, publication or broadcast, mode of artistic expression, or something like a disk drive or even a piece of paper would be media. It's some vehicle or just means of conveying an idea or a message of some sort. So what all does media encompass? It would be things included to, but not limited to, TV, radio, newspapers, books, music, art, visual art, advertising, internet, and video games.
How about writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, newspaper and books, and like I said, not limited to, there's tons more, and writing would be one of those. Even telephone communication could be considered media, just person to person could fit it well within the realm of media. And the latest being social media, which has just come about in the past decade or so. These include Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And those are just to name a few. Again, there are plenty more out there. And then this brings us up to a timeline. So from about 31,000 BC to 105 AD is where we see the first writings, alphabets, libraries, and papers. And during this time it was where you would find the Old Testament being comprised, written. And primarily because of Egyptian papyrus scrolls coming about in around 600 BC. And then in 1450, we see Gutenberg's printing press. This was huge because this was the absolute first time that we saw multiple copies of an exact work being able to be made and readily available to the public. Of course, but prior to that, we were making copies of, say, the Bible by hand. But this was the first time where you get an exact copy every single time for the mass to be consuming the exact same media. Which also led to Martin Luther's 95. First successful newspaper was the Boston Newsletter in 1704. Another important date would be 1791, when the Bill of Rights was ratified. This gave us the freedom of speech, which greatly accelerated the use of media and kind of fashioned the whole way that we're able to use it today, being multiple users, multiple contributors, and multiple outlets. So then we see the invention of the camera. This gave us actual visual record for the first time. People could write about happenings and record history, but up to this time, we weren't able to actually visually capture what was happening at the time. In 1835, Samuel Morse invents Morse code. This was huge because this was the first time that we were able to break the distance barrier. Morse code could be transmitted over air. And then in 1844, he was granted a, oh, sorry, I skipped one. He was granted a patent for the telegraph. And before the telegraph, the maximum speed that information could travel was 35 miles per hour. It was as fast as you could travel because there was no means other than hand-to-hand handoff of information prior to the telegraph. Alexander Graham Bell invents the telephone. Oh, another thing about Morse code and information travel. If some of you remember from our first Roman session, there was a little, some difficulty kind of grasping, myself included, how the letters to the Romans were delivered, read, who was he writing to, how did it get there, that sort of thing. Because in this time, he couldn't have just tweeted, hang in there, at the Romans, hashtag Jesus is the light. He would have to write, send it off, take it to a community who would stand up and read to a crowd. And even in this time, in this country, before, even when the Transcontinental Railroad was around, newspapers would have to be delivered across the country and then split off by horseback to different places where literacy was still low, and people would still read news and things in this manner. Okay. Thomas Edison invents the talking machine in 1877. This is the phonograph, so this is what led us to recorded music as we know it today. Edison Labs develops the movie camera in 1888. Heinrich Hertz, in that same year, transmits wireless sound waves for the first time. This is the beginning of radio. In the 1890s, we see something called yellow journalism come about. This was a style of writing where we first started to see the sense of,
Sensational.
Sensationalizing, this was important. Sensationalizing the news. Broad headlines, dramatic lead-ins to get you to stick around. This is what yellow journalism was all about. This brings us up to the 20th century. The Birth of the Nations was released in 1950, which was the first full-length film to significantly impact culture. Charlie Chaplin becomes the first entertainer to earn $1 million. And I mean, that was in, I mean, think about $1 million in 1917. That's still a lot of money, but I mean, a huge amount of money. This is the first time we start to see people being made to be celebrities for the first time. In 1923, Lita Forrest shows the first talkie, which is the form of movies that we know and love today. And that same year, AT&T created the first network, this was the beginning of consistent views transmitted to multiple people, much in the same way that the printing press allowed us to start copying printed material. The network was able to syndicate media so that people across the country are hearing and seeing the same media at the exact same time, consistency. The 1930s and 40s were the golden age of movies. This is where our idea of Hollywood as it is today began to emerge. In 1934, the Federal Communications Commission was established, which regulates media and how we use it. Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast was impactful because this was a transmission that wasn't announced. This was an entertainment program. People were listening to this and literally were seeking cover, running and hiding because they thought that the world was coming to an end. And that just goes to show the power of media as it has on the masses. In 1939, the TV is a hit at the World's Fair, and that's when we start to see entertainment as it is today in homes. 1947, the Red Scare leads to congressional investigation of Hollywood. I think this is significant because people in the government started to realize what a huge impact media had, whether subliminal or not, messaging on the masses. Golden Age of television. In 1952, Eisenhower runs the first 20-second spot. In 1953, Playboy magazine introduced Marilyn Monroe as the first centerfold. And this is the first time that we see pornography becoming massively available. In 1958, videotape was introduced. It was the first time that we saw the means of creating media so readily available. Film wasn't very cheap. It wasn't re-recordable. So videotape allowed ease and a cheap means of doing so. Let's see. And in 1960, the Kennedy-Nixon debate. This was the first presidential debate that was televised. And it had huge implications about what media is capable of because of its outcome. Half of the, or less than half, listened to this debate over the radio. The other half, or maybe 80% of viewers, watched it on TV. Kennedy was well rested, used stage makeup. Nixon did not. He had just come off of being hospitalized and didn't stop campaigning until an hour or so before. So he looked tired. He had stubble, and people noticed that. So people's perception of his appearance greatly affected who viewers thought won the debate. TV viewers said that Kennedy won the debate, whereas radio viewers who only heard it and didn't see them thought that Nixon won. Network news expands from 15 to 30 minutes. The Beatles' first tour of America in 1964. Late 1960s, the internet is formed for exchange of ideas, although it wasn't publicly available. In 1969, Neil Armstrong walks on the moon, and we see it. 1972, cigarette advertising is banned from TV. This is another monumental point where the government and the population realizes the extent of power that association has in advertising through visual imagery and television. Richard Nixon resigns as a result of media's coverage of Watergate, and in 1976, I believe, yeah, Apple sells the first home computers. 1981, MTV first airs. First video was Video Killed the Radio Star, which is appropriate. I don't have the date here, but the Home Shopping Network debuts, and this led to things like Amazon, which is it's almost shopped more than stores like Walmart these days. So in the 90s, internet access opened up to the general public, which changed everything, which is what allowed us to have mobile media and internet media such as YouTube and Facebook and whatnot. Telecommunications Act of 1976 brings VCHIP deregulation and dramatic increase in mergers and takeovers. The VCHIP is something that was installed every TV produced past the year 2000 has to have one of these. It's basically parental controls that you're all familiar with, the TV 14 or whatever rating in the corner. It reads those and will not allow you to view certain content. And in the 2000s, YouTube and social media make media participatory, meaning user-generated content. You're no longer just a viewer and a reader of media. Now you're involved and you're creating it. And then of course we've got social networking like Facebook and Twitter.
Why are you skipping email?
I'm sorry?
Why are you skipping? You never mentioned.
Oh, that's right. I would, yeah, absolutely. Email is absolutely valid media. Absolutely. I categorize that in the internet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the next section we're going to talk about is how do we look critically at media in your own life, and we have 3 practical points. So before we get into that, we did a little research, and we wanted to make sure that we had consulted some Catholic resources as we developed our talk. So one of the things we're going to pull from a lot is a family guide to using media. And if you want to dig deeper into some of the kind of thoughts, and this came from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, you can go to this link here. We actually have a handout for you at the end of the night that has the link on it where you can read the full article. But it's pretty intuitive as far as from a Catholic perspective, how do you look critically at media? So we're going to combine some of their points with some of Cody's experiences and some other kind of thoughts with that. So the first point we have is looking critically at the media. So this quote from Matthew 6:22, if you did the discipleship challenge, you'll know this was the first day. The lamp of the body is the eye. If your eye is sound, your whole body will be filled with light. So the lamp of your body is the eye. If your eye is sound, your whole body will be filled with light. So in order to be filled with light, we have to protect our eyes, right? So the way that we look at media and the media that we consume affects our ability to protect our entire, kind of the integrity of our body and the integrity of our minds. So it's very important that we have that, kind of that filter that we look through. And it's not just a filter of, oh, this is entertaining or this isn't, but a filter of, here's my kind of moral compass, here's my faith. Now I'm going to look through that filter as I start to engage in these different types of media. Now, one thing that I do want to kind of start out with is we're not really going to give a list of you should watch this channel or not this channel, or this show or not that show, because that's not really for us to say. Because everybody's moral compass, is a little different. And so what we hope to accomplish is to really give you some tools to look critically and let your conscience be your guide, and hopefully maybe fine-tune it a little bit, but not so much as we're going to tell you yes, no kind of decisions. So Cody's going to talk a little bit now about the motivation of media and how it works, because a lot of understanding how to look critically at the media comes from understanding how the media works. So what drives media decisions? Why do certain TV shows stay on versus others don't stay on too long? And it's kind of eye-opening, so I'll let Cody tell you a little bit more about that from his perspective.
Okay, so in terms of the media's motivation, first we have to understand that this is a machine that has been able to stay afloat and working for a long time, and the way that it does that is through money. There are very few outlets of media that don't revolve around making money of some sort. And most of these major, especially the major ones, are owned by corporations. NBC, ABC, all those. So these corporations most likely diversify. They either own subsidiary companies, or they have a parent company who owns multiple things like producing products and goods to services and things of that nature. And local and national politics often have a substantial effect on how a business operates, how they make money, how they save money, how much money they make, how much taxes they pay. These companies often use their media outlets then to influence the way, influence public opinion, to try to sway the balance in their direction, and influence their audience to make choices that support their interests. And these corporate agendas may be subtle or not. Some of them, I mean, I'm sure people could shout out a few, and then some are not so obvious, like comedy shows that certain corporations may produce and things. But we'll talk a little bit about how to read into that a little bit later. One of the media arenas that most obviously presents these corporate agendas are television news programs. No matter what political party you belong to, you would probably identify news stations that are biased one way or another. Democrats would most likely claim that Fox News delivers coverage with a Republican bias, and Republicans would most likely claim that NBC News delivers coverage with a Democratic bias. So both sides are likely right because both are owned by corporations who stand to benefit financially from opposite ends of the political spectrum. And these do take massive amounts of money to function. Some of them rely on subscription services or one-time paid views, like, pay-per-view, or when you go to the movies, rent a video, whatnot. And others, which are free, such as broadcast TV or over-the-air TV, rely on advertising. Same thing with websites, social media. Even in your email, you'll see advertisements on the side based on what you've been searching for, the websites you've been visiting, and whatnot. These companies data mine search banks and use companies like Facebook and Google to associate things that you post about, keywords that you use to sell you, or to put the right advertising in front of you. And these advertisers pay these media outlets buku bucks for this information. Just like any other programming, news relies on ratings. So shows with higher ratings mean that larger audiences are viewing those programs. Obviously, advertisers want to be in front of those larger audiences. So in turn, they'll pay more for those shows. So corporations and media outlets, being wise to that, will try to adapt their content to try to bring you in, such as sensationalism and news bumpers. Everybody's tuned into the news one time looking for a specific story, and they keep referencing it and won't let you have that information till the very end to make sure that you stay and get those ratings. There's a company called Nielsen, which monitors TV ratings and things of that nature, which collects that data. So I think that brings us up to motivation.
One last little point about the media that I thought was interesting. I was listening to NPR the other night on my way home from work, and they were talking about, when we talk about our personal information, you have to be aware that your information is getting passed on, whether it's being sold or used, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Everything that you do on there, everything you like, is sending basically information back to a database, to the point that they're starting to use facial recognition cameras in certain department stores. So if or your GPS on your cell phone, so if you're a frequent shopper, if you've signed up for the rewards program, they'll actually track where you are in the store and how much time you spend in each department to know, well, where do we want to place our products? Or, who should we advertise to? Or maybe I'll send a coupon to their phone because I know they're looking at fishing rods or, whatever. So it is very eye-opening to understand that in a world that is so rich with information, that also includes all of our information as well. So it's just kind of something to keep in your mind when you're thinking about how you want to engage with different media outlets. So to keep a critical eye, based on the article from the USCCB, if you want to. The first one is look intelligently at media. So when we talk about looking intelligently at media, most media conveys a moral message, whether it's a good message or a bad message. There's some kind of, otherwise we wouldn't as humans feel attached or be able to relate to it, right? So it's got to put a story in context of something we can relate to, whether it's good or bad, good decisions, bad decisions. So when we look intelligently at media, it's really challenging ourselves to create that separation. To create that separation between what is reality and what is fantasy. And sometimes if we can start to relate with the characters on a show, that line gets a little blurred, right? So if we can relate with this character that's going through this, this, and this, that's very similar to what I'm going through. So maybe that means something for my life, or maybe I should draw some conclusions from that. And that's a very slippery slope. So looking intelligently at the media is constantly trying to put a little separation between, here's reality of my life, and here is what this program is telling me, whether it's a TV show or a website that you visit often, or even emails that you may subscribe to. You always kind of take it, not that you have to be a skeptic, but always kind of taking a step back and really looking at what's the motivation behind this and how can I use it to benefit myself versus being used by it. So the second thing is talk back to the media. So media a lot of times is one way, right? Especially TV. And TV, as we showed you earlier, is the largest means of publicizing information for the most part for people in America. So when we talk back to the media, it means a couple of things. First thing is, if we're all engaged in Facebook or social media, it's important to socialize our ideas. And what I mean by that is if we disagree with something or agree with something because it was a really great show, we loved it, the only way to get more or less of that is to make our opinions known. And a good way to do that is through Facebook and things like that. They actually did a piece on the news the other night that said companies are more likely to respond to complaints via Facebook than they are if you call their hotline or send them an email. So they're watching that. And why do you think they're watching that? Because a lot of people are on it, and word of mouth can just make you or break you. So we have to, as consumers of media and as Christians, make sure that we're talking back. And the second kind of piece of talking back is talking with your families. Because especially if you've got younger children or teenagers, but even, Cody and myself, we don't have kids yet, on the way. But, but it's important to make it not a one-way discussion, that it's an opportunity for dialogue. It's an opportunity to enrich the conversation that happens in the family. So you might say that, okay, so some shows are 90% just trash and 10% okay. So I'm going to watch the ones that are 90% okay, but regardless, there's usually 10% of that there's going to be some kind of themes that are a little, questionable. And it's important to know how to bridge that and how to approach that. And talking with each other And just asking questions like, what would you do in that situation? How would we handle that? If we were faced with that, what would we do? Is this realistic? And kind of, again, taking your brain a step back to say, we realize this isn't reality, but how in reality, because this could be a real situation, are we going to approach it should it happen to us? And again, shows that are popular and continue to stay on are ones that we can all relate to. Because if you can't relate to it, you're not going to probably enjoy it as much. Set your own agendas. So another thing that's very kind of a critical eye is whoever gets frustrated with, raise your hand if you agree, that we see more about celebrity gossip than we do about important things in the news. You know, sometimes it's more about like who's dating who, or who just got divorced, or who's getting married, or who's got a baby bump or whatever. And there's much more important things, I would hope you agree, especially if you think about Catholic social teaching, that doesn't get any coverage. Most of the garments that we buy in America are produced in countries that have slave labor or, very unfair wages and a lot of things like that, but you don't really hear about that. So the thing about setting your own agenda is constantly making sure that we're not buying into this, celebrity gossip, things that the media wants us to pay attention to because it makes money, but really keeping in mind what being a faithful Christian is important. What is that agenda? How do I prioritize the things that I want to pay attention to? And we'll talk at the end a little bit about what we call social voting, but everything you watch casts a vote. And so it's important that things that we are consuming are things that are in line with how we believe and how we feel. And so just making sure that we're not, whether it's political agendas or social agendas, or even, especially if you're a younger person, how we approach each other and how we approach people at school or work or whatever. And I think, young or, even the other folks, you have to make sure that the messages that are being portrayed are not things that I'm taking on myself and it happens. It happens to us. It happens to me. It happens to Cody, where you watch something long enough and you start to think, well, maybe it's not that bad. I'm not as bad as that person, so this has got to be okay, right? So just making sure we're constantly keeping our Christian agenda as like the top of mind and not kind of what the media is portraying as important. And the last one is looking at consequences. So raise your hand if you've ever watched a show and somebody gets into trouble and you're like, yeah, that would happen. Probably not, right? So the consequences in TV are not always accurate to the consequences of real life, whether it's things that are illegal things, sexual activity, the way we operate in relationships. The things that happen on TV don't often have the impact and consequences that happen in real life. And this is particularly important for the whole family aspect, because if you have teenagers, if you have children, if we aren't talking to them about that, they're not going to draw those conclusions that this isn't real life. Because if the majority of their frame of reference for life is coming from TV, that's what they're going to start to identify with and start to think, well, worked out for that person, so it might work out for me. And it's important as a family that we constantly keep that dialogue open that, that's interesting for TV, but here's how it really happens. Let's talk about this. What have you seen in your work life or school life that, shows you that it's a little different? Okay. So the second thing is, the second practical implication or point is being a user of media versus being used by media. There's kind of a fine line there. We're all users of media, but we want to make sure that we're not being used by the media as much as we are using it. And I believe you're going to share some things.
I'd be happy to. So a couple, in regards to social media, well, in all media really, a great way to take a step back and look the way that Anna was just describing is to take holidays, like Facebook and Twitter holidays, see if the world will continue without a status update, and see if it's still there tomorrow. But it gives you some time to step away without screens of any sort and reflect and get centered. A way to be a user of media instead of being used. A lot of the things that we've been talking about it might seem to say that there's a lot of bad stuff out there and shield yourself, but that's not the case. There's tons of great ways to get involved in media and use media that is enriching to your life. And one of those would be, and I mean, in fact, as a parish, we're trying to put some out there on YouTube. As far as YouTube goes, subscribing to the channel, like get a username. If you're going to visit YouTube, sign up and get a username, and subscribe to some channels that you like. Because no matter what, when you click on videos, there's going to be that scroll on the side that's recommending videos and things for you to watch. If you don't tell it what you like and what your morals are and where the content is that you deem valuable and worthy of your time, it's just going to throw everything at you. So it may sound counterintuitive, but sometimes the best way to target towards things that you do deem worthy is to get involved. Another way would be to utilize on-demand services and not let TV dictate your schedule. And what I mean by that, I love the show The Office to the point, to a fault, where I would, say, oh, I don't have time for dinner tonight. It's too late. We got to get home at 9 o'clock. But realizing that, and being okay with accessing that content online whenever I do have time, whenever, I let my life dictate when is a good time for me to access that and not let it drive me. Another thing is like late night TV. I love Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. But I also need to work during the day, and I need to be rested to do that. So if I stay up late every day, I'm not going to be productive. And I realize that I can access that as well, like on my lunch break, or if I'm doing like a mentally low-level task, maybe I can turn it on in the background and listen to it while I work, instead of staying up and sacrificing things in my life. Another way to be a user and not be used is to be aware of how online advertising works, kind of as we just talked about. And it is tough to break the cycle. I mean, it's just like any other habit trying to break, especially for my generation and younger. For example, I grew up on TV and video games. I've had a controller in my hand since I was like 7 years old. So that's like ingrained in me. And so much so that like recently there was a game that came out, some of you back there may know, Call of Duty, which is huge right now. And all my friends play it, everybody talks about it, and I just had to get a copy and had to play. And it's addicting, and I was just on it so much that she would be a testament to that. But and then I started to realize like what is actually going on in this game, and that it simulates warfare, for those of you that don't know, which is it is entertaining and it's fun to play, I'll admit. But if you really think about what's going on, you're making entertainment out of loss of life, and it's really sad to think about that that's a form of entertainment. And I mean, to count the number of players online, it's huge. This is a massive thing that goes on, and it really does devalue human life because your character gets in there, you run out and you kill someone, and then they kill you, and then you just regenerate, and that's not the way life works. And I think it really does lessen the impact of major things that are going on in our world. But like I said, I mean, these things are hard to tear away from. And especially younger generations growing up with social media, as we talked about, which is now like totally interactive, because it's not just, I was always consuming TV and video games, but I wasn't involved in it the way that our youth is now. So I think that's something that we need to pay attention to and try to help young people understand, what exactly is going on, when they use those certain types of media. Next slide.
So, as part of this point, the first thing is seeing the whole picture. So, Cody talked earlier about, TV stations are owned by corporations. The corporation has an agenda, so the TV station is going to play stuff that's related to that agenda, right? So, would you say that is biased or non-biased? That's probably got a little bit of bias, right? Or they're not telling the whole story. So as a Christian consumer of media, we always have to look at the whole picture. And a good way to do that is trying to diversify where you're getting your information, and particularly when it comes to news. So if you are diehard for one news outlet, it's important to maybe get some news in other areas, whether it's online or through the newspaper or whatever, because then you start to get a bigger picture of everything that's going on. So as trying not to be used by media, it is important to diversify where you're getting your information. The second point is to talk to each other about it. Or I'm sorry, being alert to the effects of advertising. So Cody was talking about how advertisers work through the media. But it's not just the commercials that you see. And I think a lot of times we think advertising, that's commercial, right? It's also all the things that happen inside the show. So if you've ever heard of product placement, right? So they're trying to sell things in the show. I mean, to the point that they're so blatant, there's actually a reality show now that the person that wins that night, their dress design or whatever, goes to Macy's and you can go buy it the next day. So this whole show is designed to sell products in the store the next day because it's entertaining to watch. And oh, by the way, you can go buy this. Specifically with kids programs too. I mean, every show has an action figure or some kind of figurine that you can buy at the store. So when we talk about this, I mean, just a personal story, we subscribed to Netflix, and I found a show, and I was like, oh, this is kind of entertaining, and I kind of got sucked in, and then every hour of my waking life, I was like, oh, I just have to watch the next one. Because on Netflix, every episode of the entire series is there, so there's no, you don't have to wait for the next week. It's kind of bad. But one of the things I started noticing is some of my priorities were changing based on the priorities of the show. And I mean, I don't consider it a terrible show, but at the same time, it was promoting values that weren't my own. And I started noticing a lot of it was very much into materialism. And so I started noticing when I went to the store, things I never would have wanted to spend my money on. I was like, oh, I gotta have that. It looks so good on her. I've gotta have that, right? So I had to take a step back and actually stop watching it because I realized that it was kind of polluting my sense of self, because what I valued was starting to get diminished because it was so enticing to see how excited these people were and the lives they led. And so it's very important that when we start to think about things differently, we ask ourselves, why are we thinking about things differently? Is it because of something I'm exposing myself to, or is it generally, I have a genuine change of heart on something? Because you can change your mind, that's fine. But just kind of asking yourself, am I changing it because I have a good reason to, or am I changing it because I feel pressured to by media or by things that I'm engaged in, or the way I choose to spend my time? Okay. It's always good to talk to each other. So when we think about media, in particular TV, again, it's very one-directional, right? So we want to make sure that it is something that is building us up as a family or as a unit. So whether your family is 2 people, 5 people, yourself, you want to make sure that it's something that is bringing you together instead of separating you. And what I mean by that is nobody has to raise their hand. This isn't, I'm not going to be pointing anybody out, but think about in your family, when you guys sit down to watch TV, is it, the parents off in this room, or mom's here, dad's there, and all the kids are over here, or everybody's in their own room? Or is it everybody's together kind of compromising and talking about what they're watching? Because more and more today, you go into people's homes, and every room in the house, bathroom included, has got a TV in it. And while that's probably entertaining, Cody would not be out there. Really living there probably. It really is a detriment to the family, and because the importance that I think a lot of these points tie together is that you're able to use it as a chance for dialogue. So if this piece of media is allowing you to have conversations that maybe you wouldn't have had, or allow you to kind of grow as a family in a new way, I would consider that good media. But if it's causing you guys to be like, well, I don't want to watch that, well, I'm going to watch this, well, I'm going to do that, that is pulling the family in different directions. And think about all the time we spend in front of the TV. If all that time is spent by ourselves, it's probably not the best way to use the media that's out there. And like I said, even if it's just a regular TV program, it doesn't have to be EWTN that you have to sit around and watch the family together, but just any kind of program that you're interested in, it helps build that commonality and that unity within the family to bring people together instead of, well, I'm going to do my thing, you do your thing, and so just kind of think about how does your family operate and how can we get to that unity versus everybody's kind of off doing their separate things. And lastly, thinking about media as it relates to Catholic social teaching. And the first thing, go ahead. We're gonna look to my good friend Aretha Franklin here, and the whole underlying thing of this is R-E-S-P-E-C-T. So we have to have respect, and we're going to talk about it in the respecting Catholic social teaching as you engage the media. So that's things like respect for human life, respect for human dignity, respect for the gospel and the values of the gospel. So when you're looking at the media, ask yourself, how is this show or this email or this website portraying the dignity of human life? Whether that's actual human life, like, from birth to death, like the life of the person, or the dignity of the person during that life. Because I think a lot of times, it might not be as drastic as, well, we're running around killing everybody, but it might be that it's a comedy show, but the comedy is not designed to build people up. It's not designed just to be funny, it's designed as put down. It's always designed at picking at somebody. And that's really not, I guess, treating that human person with dignity. And the more we start to watch this kind of stuff, it's not that I'm going to go out and say everything that the person on TV said, but it starts to desensitize us a little bit to it. And even in the example of the show that I was talking about earlier, I even started noticing my train of thought changing, that I'm not as bad as that person, so it's not that bad. It may not have been the way I would have thought, 2 months ago, but it's not that bad. And so it kind of plays tricks with your mind. So we always want to look at the programming and the outlets that we're engaged in and say, how does this line up with my values? And we talk about the gospel, that's things like reconciliation, forgiveness, compassion. Does this show have a theme of compassion, or is everybody, constantly fighting and just at each other? Things like Thanksgiving. Do people appreciate each other? Do they enjoy each other? So it's really looking at the themes of the program, and on an average, are these things that are building you up, or are they things that are tearing down the family or tearing down the person? And Cody's going to talk about one particular outlet of that.
So, as Anna was just talking about, these are a core set of guidelines that you should, safe to say, make sure that what you're consuming fits with. And the one category that would fit with none of that is the X-rated or pornography. Pornography is the one type of media that cannot be justified by any of those means. Some people might argue that there is more tasteful pornography than others, but even still, it doesn't, no matter what, it would not fit within the guidelines of those keys to respect. And we're going to talk about mainly related to relationships in the institution of marriage. Porn makes women out to be objects, and men as well. I say women, and this is mainly guided in the male direction because males are the vast majority of the consumers of pornography, and it is geared towards males. It makes sexuality selfish and purely physical, meaning that when you're engaging in pornography, you're engaging with an image. You're not engaging with a person. Nonetheless, your spouse, or anyone if you are unmarried. And like I said before, porn is typically about male gratification and reinforces falsehoods about what healthy sexuality in a relationship looks like. Studies show that more a person watches pornography, the less satisfied they are with the looks and sexual performance of their mate, and more skewed their expectations, because it does create false expectations of, again, like I said, of what sexual intimacy is all about. And in some cases, men turn to pornography when there are intimacy issues in the relationship, which is the only thing that does is compound the issue. Because, like I said, it does taint the man's vision of what healthy intimacy is about. Also, the representation of marriage itself within pornography. Porn does not often feature loving and faithful married couples engaging in sexual activity. Oftentimes, a married character would appear pursuing adventures outside of that marriage, thus representing marriage as hampering sexual pleasure rather than marriage is the key in that equation. Outside of relationships, it does have a profound effect on culture and its own demands. We talked a lot about what drives media to create content. The consumption of pornography only further promotes a demand for entertainers. Meaning, if there wasn't an audience to consume this particular type of media, the industry wouldn't make any money, and they would cease to produce it because, like I said before, basically all media is driven by money in some manner. So it does continue to bring people into this lifestyle. So not only does it affect the viewer, it also affects those involved because it takes lives of people, ruining lives to make this sort of content, which does not fit into our list of acceptable criteria. And it's not always about items found in an adult bookstore or adult video store. It's also gratuitous use of explicit imagery in various forms. In movies, I mean, I do think that there are places where, like in storylines, where the suggestion or nurturing sexual intimacy within a marriage, that there's a place for that in certain films and things, but in an extremely tasteful manner and not gratuitous explicit imagery in movies and TVs and cable TV networks. And it all comes down to respect, like we just said before. And as we touched on before, we all have a choice. Like Anna said, in many ways we're exposed to things that we can't really choose to avoid. But others we do have a choice, and we need to cast our votes appropriately. She spoke about casting votes before. And what we mean when we say voting, it's very similar to when you go to the grocery store and you load up your cart with items that you like. You go and you pay for those items, the grocery store records that inventory and orders more of that product. The supplier makes a profit, continues to produce like items. The same thing happens with media. The more that you consume, you say, hey, we like this, keep making this. And simply by just purchasing or clicking or buying into, you don't have to get on Twitter or Facebook and tell them, keep doing this, we like it, just by buying and putting money in their pockets to produce more, cast that vote. As far as voting, myself as a producer of media content, I do my best to try to choose the right types of media to be involved with. And there have been several things over my career that have led me to that. For example, I got a call one day to go shoot a piece for the TV show Maury. And when I got the call, I was like, oh, this will be fun, yeah. Paternity test, thought it was kind of funny, and shooting something for a show that is known, and people know that I can tell, hey guys, I'm shooting on Maury today. But then I get there, and it was a piece. It was one of the pieces where we went out and remotely shot a follow-up on a. It was like one of those boot camp situations. So it was kind of disguised as lifting these people up and trying to make a difference. And we went there and went to shoot, and and it was an absolutely poverty-stricken area, like right here near to home. I didn't know such things existed. And I just felt so filthy videotaping these people and following the producer's notes as far as like, you know, don't show that and just zoom in tighter so we don't see this environment that they're living in, make it look like they're doing great. And it was just really upsetting. And just an example of, you know, insiders' kind of view on how the media can affect not even those that watch it, but those that are in the spotlight, and those that are manipulated and sometimes taken advantage of through media. But on that sad note, thank you.